In the quiet Midwestern town of River Falls, Wisconsin, summer in 2012 was supposed to be peaceful, ordinary, predictable. A place where neighbors waved hello, children played in backyards, and families walked their dogs at dusk, just like they had for generations. But on one July afternoon, that calm was shattered, not by a stranger lurking in the night, but by someone the community thought they knew intimately. A father. His name was Aaron Schaffhausen, a man whose name would soon be etched into tragedy. He had once shared a home, a life, and 3 daughters with his ex-wife, Jessica Schaffhausen. A family that, on paper, looked like many others in this peaceful town. But appearances can be deceiving. What was meant to be a story of ordinary family life would lead to a horror no one could imagine. A betrayal so deep it would leave a community reeling. What happened that day in July? How did a father, a man entrusted with the safety of his children, become the catalyst of an unspeakable tragedy? These are the questions that would grip River Falls and the nation. Today, we will explore a case that forces us to confront the darkest possibilities of human emotion. How far can a person go to punish someone they once loved? This is the story of Aaron Schaffhausen, the quiet town, the hidden pain, and the unimaginable betrayal. A story that begins with an ordinary afternoon and ends with a question no one ever wants to hear. What could drive a father to turn on his own children? Hello guys, welcome to my channel where interesting stories of true crimes, mysteries, and cold cases are told. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, share it with your friends. To understand how a tranquil Midwestern life was shattered forever on July 10, 2012, we must first look at the people at the center of this story. Not as headlines, not as statistics, but as a mother, 3 daughters, and a father whose life took an impossible turn. In the year 2000, Aaron and Jessica Schaffhausen became husband and wife. Over the next decade, they built a family together in River Falls, Wisconsin, a small city of about 15,000 nestled near the Minnesota border. Their union brought 3 children into the world: Amara, Sophie, and Cecilia, girls who, in all the ways that matter to a parent, were bright, beloved, and full of promise. Amara was the oldest, 11 years old in 2012, a child on the brink of adolescence. Sophie, at age 8, was playful and energetic, the one who brought laughter to quiet rooms. And Cecilia, just 5 years old, lived in that space of early childhood where every day is new and full of wonder. Jessica's life revolved around her daughters. She lived with them in a house in River Falls that she rented from Aaron, even after their marriage ended. As a mother, she handled their daily routines: school lunches, bedtime stories, parents' evenings, recital practices, and the ordinary rhythms that make a child feel safe and loved. Amara and Sophie attended Greenwood Elementary School, where they shared classrooms, friendships, and playground memories with other children in the community. Jessica was granted primary physical custody of the girls when the divorce was finalized in January 2012. Though the divorce marked the end of her marriage, it did not erase the ties that bound her to Aaron through their children. The girls had grown up in River Falls. Their school, their friends, their routines all rooted in this familiar place. Aaron Schaffhausen, once present in the fabric of family life, became a figure increasingly defined by distance. After the divorce, he moved to Minot, North Dakota, where he took work in construction. The separation meant weeks, sometimes months, between visits with his daughters. But this physical distance also corresponded with a shift in his emotional state. In the months before July 2012, friends and family saw Aaron's behavior change. In court testimony and news reports from his trial, it became clear that his contact with Jessica was relentless, sometimes amounting to dozens of calls in a single day. These calls were not simply updates about shared parenting arrangements. They were intense, anguished, and often overwhelming. Prosecutors described Aaron as angry and bitter, fixated on the dynamics of his post-divorce life, particularly Jessica's new relationships after their marriage ended. One episode from earlier that year stood out in testimony. An incident where Aaron told Jessica he wanted to return to River Falls, bind her, and make her choose which daughter he would kill, watching as it happened. And as you listen to this story, you realize these were real lives, real children, and real suffering. If you truly care about remembering them, understanding the consequences of violence, and honoring the memories of Amara, Sophie, and Cecilia, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Because turning away now is a choice too, and they deserve to be remembered. This chilling statement was among those recounted during his trial, painting a picture of a mind in turmoil and touching on tensions that had grown between them. Aaron's life in North Dakota, according to defense statements made at trial, was marked by strains beyond the divorce itself. He took construction work and at times was prescribed antidepressants, which his attorney claimed he sometimes combined with alcohol. His behavior, friends and family later said, appeared erratic and steeped in anger. Anger that prosecutors argued was not directed simply inward, but outward, aimed at the woman he once married. Meanwhile, Jessica strove to maintain normalcy for her daughters. She kept their routine steady: drop-offs at school, extracurricular activities, bedtime prayers, all the small, irreplaceable moments that form a child's world. Today, she has written about those final, ordinary mornings before tragedy struck, recalling walks to the car, small conversations over breakfast, and the hope that each day might hold a little more happiness than the last. If stories like this matter to you, if remembering these children matters, subscribing isn't just support for this channel, it's a way of choosing not to look away. Amara, Sophie, and Cecilia were defined by how they lived. Friends and classmates remember them as vibrant children who loved school, playtime, and family gatherings. Their laughter once echoed in the halls of Greenwood Elementary. Their drawings once adorned the fridge at home. They were daughters with distinct personalities, hopes, and favorite songs, a world of potential cut far too short. In the background of all this were the complexities of custody and co-parenting. Though Aaron and Jessica shared legal custody, Jessica had control over the children's daily lives, health decisions, and schooling. Aaron continued to visit when arrangements allowed, but each visit carried the weight of unresolved conflict, a tension that neither time nor distance had eased. Their story, in these months leading up to July 2012, was not marked by harmony. It was marked by conflict, emotional strain, unanswered questions, and a growing sense that the balance between past life and present reality was slipping further away. For Jessica, it was a life of memorials and routines built around her daughter's happiness. For Aaron, it was a life of distance, intensity, frustration, and a fixation on what had been lost. It was within this reality, of school mornings and bedtime stories, of parental hopes and unresolved conflict, that the events of July 10, 2012 would unfold. As the calendar turned to 2012, life in River Falls, Wisconsin appeared ordinary from the outside. But behind closed doors, a storm was brewing, one that would lead to a tragedy no one in this quiet community could ever forget. After Aaron and Jessica's divorce was finalized in January 2012, their 3 daughters remained in River Falls with their mother. Jessica had primary physical custody, while Aaron lived and worked in Minot, North Dakota, a world away from the home his children returned to every evening. For those who knew him during this time, Aaron began to show a pattern of behavior that worried those closest to the family. In the months before that fateful July, Aaron's calls to his ex-wife grew unusually frequent, sometimes multiple times a day, and increasingly demanding. Some days he would call Jessica dozens of times, overwhelming her phone with pleas, complaints, and ultimatums. On one occasion, Jessica later testified that Aaron had made a threatening remark that would later echo throughout the courtroom. In March 2012, he called her from North Dakota and told her he wanted to drive down to River Falls, tie her up, and force her to choose which of their daughters he would kill, while she watched. These conversations didn't occur in isolation. Friends and family began to sense something was wrong. The intensity of Aaron's calls, his fixation on his ex-wife's life, and his open resentment toward the man she was dating painted a picture of a man consumed by anger and pain. Jessica tried to maintain calm. She agreed to visits between Aaron and the girls, but often set strict conditions for those interactions. She wanted these moments to be positive and safe for her children, even if her relationship with their father had fallen apart. Still, Aaron's emotional state remained fragile. Co-workers and acquaintances later revealed that Aaron's behavior had shifted over time. He was known to threaten to kill the man Jessica was dating, and on more than one occasion, he expressed disturbing thoughts about harming his own children. One co-worker wrote to police that Aaron had made disturbing statements about harming his children and his ex-wife. By late spring of that year, his voice messages, calls, and unannounced visits had become more frequent and intense. Aaron contacted Jessica repeatedly, sometimes up to 30 times in a single day. He was distressed, angry, and clearly struggling to cope with life after divorce. To those around him, Aaron's anger appeared tied to more than just missing his children. His resentment toward Jessica was deeply personal, driven by jealousy over her life without him and the new relationship she had begun. Instead of moving forward, he remained fixated on what he believed he had lost. Even as the divorce settlement granted co-parenting rights, Aaron's behavior continued to escalate. In a March 2012 harassment incident, police records show that he made threats involving at least one of the children, though no restraining order was issued. The seriousness of that warning was not publicly addressed at the time. For Jessica, each unanswered text and each repeated call became a heavy burden. a reminder that her ex-husband had not accepted their new reality. In the quiet moments between the calls, she focused on her daughters' lives, school lunches, bedtime routines, and the laughter that filled their home. Yet an ongoing sense of unease remained. If you're still listening at this point, it means these children's lives matter to you. And subscribing is one small way of making sure their story isn't forgotten. Weeks passed. Days stretched into long periods where Aaron's attempts at contact shifted between pleas for closeness and deeply concerning remarks. He wanted to see his daughters. He insisted on seeing them. What became increasingly unclear was whether this need was rooted in care or something far more troubling. Then came the text message on July 10, 2012, a request from Aaron to see his daughters at a time that was not scheduled or expected. Jessica agreed, asking only that he leave before she returned home. A babysitter waited with the excited children, unaware that this day would become the most devastating of their lives. In the hours that followed, tensions that had been building for months reached a breaking point, and the quiet town of River Falls would never be the same again. Part 3. On July 10, 2012, in the peaceful River Falls community of western Wisconsin, an ordinary afternoon became the most tragic day in the life of one family. What began as an unplanned visit would end in a loss no parent should ever endure. Aaron Schaffhausen had driven from Minot, North Dakota to River Falls earlier that day after contacting his ex-wife Jessica to ask to see their daughters. Jessica, unaware of what was about to unfold, agreed, on the condition that the visit take place while she was away. When Aaron arrived at the house, the girls, Amara, age 11, Sophie, age 8, and Cecilia, age 5, greeted him with excitement. A babysitter watching them that afternoon observed what appeared to be a normal and happy reunion. The girls talked, laughed, and shared stories about school and their daily lives. The babysitter eventually left, unaware that this routine departure would be the last time she would see the three children alive. Inside the home, events unfolded that would forever change River Falls. Investigators later established a timeline showing that the children were killed inside the house by their father. Their deaths were later confirmed through forensic findings presented in court. Afterward, the girls were placed back into their beds, a scene later documented by law enforcement and described during trial proceedings. Other signs inside the home suggested that additional actions may have been considered or attempted. Approximately 2 hours after arriving, Aaron contacted Jessica. Jessica, devastated and faint with disbelief, dialed 911 as she drove back toward the home she used to share with her daughters. River Falls police officers were dispatched, their radios crackling through what would become one of the darkest calls in the department's history. When law enforcement arrived inside the house, they found scenes that no first responder ever wants to witness. The girls lay in their respective beds, still tucked under blankets, as if they were sleeping, until the reality became unmistakable. The officers saw what appeared to be dried blood on their faces and bedding, a carpet stained with dark pools of loss, and rooms emptied of life. One investigator later described entering the house with a paramedic, only to find each child motionless in her bedroom, the covers still pulled up, the innocence of bedtime forever shattered. At nearly the same moment that police processed the scene of unimaginable grief, Aaron Schaffhausen walked into the River Falls police station and surrendered himself. News of the crime spread quickly. Neighbors stepped back from their lawns, disbelief etched on their faces. River Falls, a community where children played freely and parents felt secure, was forced to confront a truth that seemed impossible. A father had taken the lives of his own children. Community members, friends, and extended family were left grappling with a wave of shock and sorrow. The local school where the girls had attended would soon become a place of mourning rather than laughter. Those who had once waved at Amara and Sophie on the playground now whispered prayers for them. Grief spread through the tight-knit town like wildfire. For every neighbor who drove by the home, every parent who looked at their own children with fresh tears in their eyes, and every first responder who had stood in that blood-stained carpet, the unimaginable had become reality. And for Jessica, the shock was personal. A nightmare unfolding in real time as she raced home. Her tears, her disbelief, and the heartbreak that followed would ripple through the community and the courtroom in the months to come. This was not a crime of passion. It was a moment that tore apart the heart of a family and left a scar on a community that would remember that July afternoon forever. If you're still listening, it means you don't turn away from stories like this. Subscribing is one small way to show that these children mattered. The first step for detectives was to secure the scene and begin documenting the physical evidence. Photographs were taken, rooms were mapped, and every piece of material was cataloged. From the positioning of the children's bodies to the white t-shirts tied around their necks, a grim detail that would later be discussed in court. As the initial examination continued, officers learned that the girl's father, Aaron Schaffhausen, had walked into the River Falls Police Department shortly after the discovery and surrendered himself. His shorts bore what appeared to be bloodstains. Detectives attempted to speak with him, but he initially refused to answer questions, leaving investigators to rely on other methods to piece together what had occurred. A key part of the investigation involved speaking with people who had been close to the girls and their parents. The babysitter who had been watching Amara, Sophie, and Cecilia earlier that afternoon told officers that the children were happy to see their father when he arrived for the unplanned visit. This testimony helped establish a timeline of events that put Aaron at the home before the murders took place. At the same time, law enforcement began interviewing neighbors, friends, and family members to gather context about Aaron's behavior in the weeks and months leading up to the tragedy. They learned that he had made numerous calls to Jessica in the months prior, in some cases calling up to 30 times a day, and that he had once expressed threatening statements suggesting he wanted to harm his children and his ex-wife. This information would become crucial in understanding motive. Investigators also collected telephone records, which confirmed the volume and frequency of Aaron's calls to Jessica in the period before the murders. These records showed a pattern of escalating contact that prosecutors later used to support their argument of revenge as a driving factor in Aaron's actions. Physical evidence from the home was paired with witness testimony to form a narrative that prosecutors would present at trial. Gasoline found in the basement suggested an attempt, whether successful or not, to destroy evidence or damage the property after the murders. While investigators could not yet determine the full purpose of that act, it raised questions about Aaron's intentions after the killings. As detectives sifted through each piece of evidence, they asked a question that would resonate throughout the legal proceedings. Why would a father take the lives of his own children? To answer that, they had to look beyond the physical scene and into Aaron's past actions and statements. Prosecutors later argued that Aaron's motive was rooted in bitterness and anger over his divorce and his perception that his ex-wife had moved on with another man. In opening statements, the prosecutor told jurors that Aaron was so determined to punish Jessica that he chose a method of harm that would cause her the deepest suffering imaginable, by ending the lives of their daughters. Questions about motive and mental state would later be central to the trial, but from the moment police entered that home and began collecting evidence, the direction of the investigation was clear. This was not a random act of violence. It was a crime with a sequence of decisions, communications, and actions that pointed investigators toward a tragic motive and toward a search for answers that would take months to fully uncover. For cases like this to remain part of the public record, rather than fading into obscurity, someone has to keep telling them, and choosing to subscribe is one small way of making sure these children are not forgotten. How did authorities uncover the truth behind this act? They followed the evidence. From the physical scene to the digital footprint of phone calls, to the interviews with those who knew these children and their father. Each piece brought them closer to understanding not just that the crime had occurred, but why it had unfolded in the way that it did. In the days and weeks that followed, pre-trial proceedings began. Aaron initially entered not guilty pleas to all charges. Defense attorneys and prosecutors engaged in legal wrangling over what evidence would be permitted at trial, including graphic crime scene photos and other sensitive materials. A judge ultimately ruled that the defense would be entitled to examine this evidence, though with restrictions to prevent its public disclosure. As preparations for trial continued, Aaron's legal strategy underwent a critical change. In March 2013, he shifted his plea to guilty but insane, acknowledging that he had carried out the killings and accepted responsibility for the act itself, but asserting that he was not legally responsible because of a mental disease or defect that prevented him from knowing his actions were wrong or being able to control his conduct. This plea set the stage for a judge and jury to focus not on whether Aaron had committed the murders, that fact was no longer in dispute, but on his mental state at the time of the killings. In Wisconsin, such a plea requires the defense to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant lacked substantial capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness of his actions or to conform his conduct to the law. During the sanity phase of the trial, over 50 witnesses would take the stand. This included mental health experts for both the prosecution and the defense, who offered sharply contrasting opinions on Aaron's psychological condition at the time of the murders. Defense-hired experts, including psychiatrists and psychologists, testified that he suffered from major depression and other mental health challenges significant enough to impair his judgment. Prosecutors, however, countered these claims with evidence and testimony that Aaron understood what he was doing and was fully aware of the wrongfulness of his actions. In opening statements, the lead prosecutor described how Aaron had planned the visit, traveled from North Dakota, and then carried out the murders, all with awareness of the consequences. He told jurors that Aaron's motives were rooted in anger and bitterness toward his ex-wife, and that help had been available, but unwanted. Character and eyewitness testimony also played a role. Friends and acquaintances described earlier comments Aaron had made about harming his family, including remarks to co-workers and threatening statements directed at his ex-wife's new partner. These accounts were presented alongside the phone records and communications investigators had gathered. Family members of the victims also entered the courtroom. During sentencing, the girl's aunt delivered a heartfelt victim impact statement, describing Aaron as the darkness, the boogeyman that every child fears, and reminding the court how he had used his daughter's love to draw them close before taking their lives. Despite the defense's arguments and expert testimony regarding Aaron's mental condition, the jury reached a clear verdict in April 2013. After deliberating for several hours, they rejected the insanity defense, concluding that although Aaron may have had a mental disease or defect, he still knew what he was doing was wrong when he killed his daughters. Aaron chose not to take the stand in his own defense, but jurors heard excerpts from his recorded police interview. In those recordings, he cried, spoke about wanting his daughters back, and expressed confusion about his own thoughts and needs. Still, those moments of emotion were not enough to meet the legal threshold required for an insanity defense. Inside the courtroom, the central debate remained unchanged. Was this the product of severe mental collapse, or an intentional act driven by resentment and revenge? Prosecutors maintained it was the latter, and the jury ultimately agreed, signaling which version of events they found credible. As the phase focused on mental responsibility concluded, the case moved inexorably toward sentencing, the point where the law would impose consequences and the story would shift from questions of guilt to the permanence of punishment. And cases like this only stay visible when people choose not to look away. Continuing to follow and support coverage like this is one of the few ways these victims are not reduced to footnotes. By the summer of 2013, the River Falls case arrived at its final reckoning. After months of testimony and review, Aaron Schaffhausen stood before the St. Croix County Circuit Court. The jury had already rejected his claim of legal insanity, finding that he was sane and accountable when he killed his daughters, Amara, Sophie, and Cecilia. On July 15, 2013, Judge Howard Cameron imposed the harshest sentence available under Wisconsin law: 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Each life sentence corresponded to 1 child, underscoring the court's position that every life taken carried its own weight and consequence. During sentencing, family members addressed the court through tears and grief. The girl's aunt, Mary Elizabeth Stotts, described Aaron as the darkness, while their cousin, Aaron Schlauter, spoke about how her belief in a safe world ended the day the girls were killed. Aaron showed little outward reaction as the court affirmed that he understood his actions and their wrongfulness. For Jessica, the girl's mother, the outcome carried conflicting emotions. Sorrow that would never ease, paired with the knowledge that the man responsible would never be free again. The surrounding community offered support as she moved forward, carrying the memory of her daughters. Although Aaron's attorneys pursued appeals, higher courts upheld the verdicts and sentences, confirming the original findings. With the sentencing complete, the legal chapter closed, but the impact did not. The deaths of Amara, Sophie, and Cecilia reverberated throughout River Falls, leaving neighbors, classmates, and first responders grappling with loss. Media coverage focused not only on the crime itself, but on the broader realities of domestic abuse and custody-related violence. Vigils, memorials, and community gatherings were organized to honor the girls, offering moments of collective mourning and remembrance. For Jessica, these events became quiet spaces to grieve publicly while holding on to her daughter's legacy. The case continues to stand as a warning of how unresolved conflict, anger, and fixation can escalate into irreversible harm. Its consequences stretched far beyond one household, reshaping an entire community's sense of safety. In time, remembrance took a more enduring form. A memorial playground dedicated to Amara, Sophie, and Cecilia began construction in River Falls, a place meant not for tragedy, but for laughter, play, and life. Even years later, the story raises unresolved questions. Were there moments when intervention could have changed the outcome? Were warning signs missed? And how can communities better protect families before disputes turn catastrophic? At its core, this case forces uncomfortable reflection on trust, betrayal, justice, and responsibility. It challenges us to look more closely at the lives around us, and to recognize that paying attention, staying informed, and refusing to forget are small but meaningful acts in preventing history from repeating itself. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and tell us what you learned in the comments below.